Wonderful. Thank you all again for joining us today. We are very pleased to bring this session to you both in a live virtual format, but mostly thank you everybody for your time in making this happen today. My name is Megan Haw, and I am the Acting Assistant Dean of Student Services with Windsor Law. I'll start the session today by way of introduction of our panelists, and prior to that, with our land acknowledgement. The University of Windsor sits on the traditional territory of the Three Fires Confederacy First Nations, which includes the Ojibwe, the Odawa, and the Potawatomi. We respect these longstanding relationships with First Nations people in this place in the 100-mile Windsor-Essex Peninsula and the Straits Les Détroits of Detroit. We're very fortunate and grateful again today to have with us the Honorable Madame Justice Renee Pomerance. She received her Bachelor of Laws in 1987 from the University of Toronto and practiced with Crown Law Office, Criminal Ministry of the Attorney General of Ontario between 1989 and 2006, with leaves of absences to act as counsel to the Honorable Peter Corey during his involvement in the Weston Park inquiry in the United Kingdom between 2002 and 2003, and also to act as senior advisor as the National Judicial Institute in Ottawa between 2003 and 2004. Madame Justice Pomerance practiced expertise in the areas of criminal law, constitutional law, and judicial education. We're also extremely fortunate to have her as a sessional instructor here at Windsor Law. We're also joined today by Megan Howitt, Counsel and Manager of Legal Research with the Office of the Chief Justice, Superior Court of Justice, as well as Andrea Bacaglia, Windsor Law Class of 2002, who is presently clerking with the Superior Court Justice in Windsor. I'll turn it over to you all, and if there's any other introductions to be made, thank you again all for joining us and for your time.
If I may just also introduce, so as you heard, my name is Megan Howitt. I'm the Manager of Legal Research for the clerkship program. So I manage the work, and then my colleague Jennifer Beliveau is the Manager of Program Support for the clerkship program. She is the Manager of the people, as we say here. So she's also here to help us answer any questions you may have today.
Hi, everyone. Did you wish me to begin, Megan, with some comments?
I'll turn it over to you all. Thank you so much.
Well, let me say it's really wonderful to be with all of you, and we're happy to answer any questions you may have about clerking. Perhaps I can give you a sense of the clerking experience from the judicial perspective, and then you'll get the real scoop from Andrea, who is our current clerk, who, having graduated in 2022 from the law school. We really value the work of our law clerks. You are an integral part of the court's work, and you will, in that capacity, engage in all sorts of different kinds of work that I'm going to speak about in a bit more detail, but you're a very important part of the court. And it is very important to us to make sure that you have a very valuable learning experience if you are clerking with us. I think some of the big advantages to clerking are the following. First of all, you get exposed to all areas of law, with the exception of those areas that are dealt with exclusively in the federal court. But you'll deal with criminal law, you'll deal with civil litigation, you'll deal with family litigation, you'll deal with appeals, summary conviction appeals, small claims court appeals, divisional court matters. It's a very broad variety. And I think you'll find that within the private bar, it's difficult to find a place where you get exposed to everything, including civil litigation and family and criminal. And so this is an opportunity for you to really test the waters. My view is that if you follow your passion, you won't need a GPS, you'll end up in the right place. But it's awfully early for you to actually know what your passion is. Some of you may have a good sense of what you want to do and how you want to practice and where you want to practice. Some of you may have no idea, and some of you may be thinking X or Y or Z. So one of the great benefits of clerking is that you have an opportunity to really dive into all areas of law and get a sense of what interests you and what excites you in terms of an area of practice. You also have an enormous variety of work. And while we were waiting for everyone to join, Matthew had asked about a typical day in the life of clerking, and Andrea had spoken about the great variety of tasks that you'll be doing. You'll be researching law, you'll be writing memos, you'll be watching cases in court, you'll be speaking to the judges about the cases and their impressions, and you'll be editing judgments. There are any number of tasks that you'll be doing, and every day is going to be different. It's a very exciting job for a judge as well, where we're dealing with a great variety. And the other thing that I think is so important is that you have an opportunity to not only learn about what judges do, but you get a chance to see very good counsel arguing in court, and sometimes counsel who are not so good. And I say that because there's learning to be had in both of those situations. You will get a sense reading written material, written arguments, what works and doesn't work. Watching in court, you'll have a sense of that. And when you go out to practice law, you'll be able to sort of use those experiences to find what works for you. You can never try to be anyone but yourself. Everyone has what it takes to be a great advocate. It's a matter of finding what your skills are and honing them. But watching others and understanding some of the stylistic approaches and advocacy approaches of others can be of great benefit. I also want to talk about the trial process versus the appeal process. When I was a lawyer, I spent close to, well, I guess it was about 18 years at the Crown Law Office Criminal, and I did almost exclusively appellate work, and I loved every second of that. It was challenging and exciting, and we were dealing with legal issues, and I heartily encourage you all to think about appellate work and think about clerking with an appellate court. Let me also say, though, that having been a judge now for 16 years in the trial courts, my biggest regret is that I didn't do more trial work as a lawyer. And the dynamic of a trial is exhilarating and rewarding in a very different way, because we are dealing directly with the people whose lives are directly affected by the dispute. It might be the accused person, it might be a victim, it might be a parent seeking custody, it might be a plaintiff injured in an accident or a traumatized witness, and I could go on and on and on. Trials are a showcase for the full spectrum of what it means to be human, from human strength to human frailty and everything in between. And that's what makes it so challenging, and what makes it extraordinary, and what makes it a privilege to be a trial judge. And so as a clerk, you will be exposed to the issues as they relate to real people who are living their lives and whose lives will be dramatically impacted by what happens in the courtroom. And I offer that also just as a reminder to you that when you're reading the groundbreaking Supreme Court of Canada decisions that you are going to read in law school, remember that everyone has a human dimension, and behind every one of those cases, there are people whose lives were affected by the outcome. And so the trial dynamic is a very rewarding and fulfilling process, and you will be a part of that as a clerk. But you also do appeals. I mean, you will be exposed to appellate work in our court, not with the same frequency as you would in a court of appeal. But as I said, there are small claims courts, some are conviction court appeals, and divisional court. The one thing that you don't do as a clerk is argue yourself in a courtroom. But what I try to do, and I've offered this to clerks over the years, is I have said to every clerk, why don't you choose an issue or a case that you would like to make an argument about, and come into my office and make your argument, engage in advocacy, and I'll give you feedback. And we'll do that as many times as you like during the year. So you don't get real court experience, but we try to make up for that by giving you a chance to try your advocacy skills and get some feedback. You'll have a mentor. I'm Andrea's mentor. I've been the mentor for clerks for several years in Windsor. I can say that clerking in any trial court is a great experience, but if I can speak a little bit closer to home, I would like to suggest that we have something quite magical here in Windsor. We have a level of collegiality that I think is rarely found anywhere. Amongst the court, amongst the judicial secretaries, persons who work in the court staff, and our clerk. And Andrea will attest to the fact that in Windsor, you are right in the middle of the action. The clerk's office is in the one corridor where all the judges are. And so someone gets off the bench and starts talking about an issue, and then another judge comes out of their office and they're talking about it. And it's generally just outside the clerk's office, and the clerk becomes a part of that. And so you really have an opportunity to be engaged very much engaged. I guess there are pros and cons. I think that in some trial courts, clerks have a more private office, and there are probably benefits to that as well. But I'll leave it to Andrea to comment on that. You're very much a part of what takes place in the courtroom. And I can also say that we may maintain our contact with clerks. You become a sort of a member of the judicial family, and we like to stay in touch and follow clerks' careers. My sense is that clerking is, of course, there's no hire back for clerking, but I think it opens a lot of doors. I think you will find that prospective employers think very highly of the clerkship experience. And the other benefit is that if you wish to be in government, either as a Crown attorney or in another capacity, you're in the hiring pool, which is also a huge advantage if that is something that you're interested in. So we really value our clerks, and we also really value the educational experience that we've promised you if you clerk with us. So think about it as an option. And when it comes to the application, think about choosing a writing sample. I'm sure we're going to get into this in a little bit more detail, but in terms of classes, legal research and writing is critical. Those are very important skills. And I will say this as well, just before I turn it over. Of course, work as hard as you can to get good grades. But if your grades are not at the very top of the class, or they're not top tier, don't let that discourage you from applying. Because grades are important, but they're not everything. And as someone who does our clerkship interviews, sometimes the person with the highest grades isn't the person that's hired, because we're looking at the whole package. So I'm not suggesting grades aren't important; they are important. But I don't want you to be discouraged from applying if you're not top of the class. Send in the application, and we put a lot of stock on the interview as well, and getting to know you and what else you've done, and so to the extent that you have other interests, we want to know about those as well. So maybe with that, I'll stop and turn the floor over to the next person who's speaking. Is that Andrea? Andrea?
It is. Okay, thank you, Justice Pomerance. I will say a few comments, and happy to answer questions later. But clerking truly is a unique experience. And I will say, again, I just graduated in June. And when I was thinking about applying in fall of my 2L year, I really wasn't very familiar with what is the role of a clerk, and also, thinking about in 2L what you want to do for your articling term. That can feel very far off. But I will say, if there's anyone here listening and is a bit tentative of potentially applying or making that decision in advance, it really all happens quite quickly. And that was something that initially had maybe held me back, but I'm very pleased with how things have unfolded. I'm someone who I'm primarily interested in public law, so criminal law, constitutional, administrative law issues, though I already have been exposed, as Justice Pomerance has been saying, to all areas of the court's jurisdiction here. So being thrown right into assisting family law motions or some civil disputes. And while initially it maybe felt a bit nerve-wracking, it was very exciting to be in the position of, okay, wow, I've been given this legal issue. I now need to go research it and become familiar, not an expert, but become very familiar because a judge is requiring my assistance. And there's something that's very empowering when you are asked questions that are outside of your comfort zone. And I would say that happens often as a clerk, and it's something to not shy away from, because I presume it's going to continue to happen throughout the course of my career, no matter what area I land in. Windsor is a special place. Of course, I have no other comparison, and I do speak with my colleagues across the province, but my office is truly in the one hallway where all of the judges have their chambers. And it means that I'm always being brought into either discussions, quick discussions of, oh, Andrew, I heard this, what do you think? What's your opinion? And the judges really want to know. They're not just asking me for sake of conversation. They really want to know, what is my informed opinion on matter X? And that's really exciting, and it's really special. And it's also challenged me to be on top of my work, try to read decisions from the Court of Appeal. Justice Pomerance tuned me into that tip. When they come in, like, there are things that we can do as clerks to try to feel ready when judges require our assistance. But otherwise, it's been a very dynamic learning opportunity. The time has flown by. Like, we think about articling in this, we have forever, but it's really just a year, and it almost doesn't feel like enough time to learn everything. But so far, it's been going well, and I think I'll leave my remarks at that point. But as the session continues, if anybody has specific questions about, my process of applying or specific to the job, we can answer that later. Thank you.
Okay, so I will speak to the nuts and bolts of the recruitment process, and then we'll be available for any questions that you have after that. So as you know, I'm sure you're aware, we're recruiting for the 2024-2025 articling year. So that's students in 2L right now. We haven't finalized our dates yet, but you should anticipate that applications will open mid-December and close in mid-January. And we will be announcing those dates exceptionally shortly, and we will be advising the Career Services Office as soon as we have those dates. And I don't know if there's any 1Ls present right now, but we also have a summer student program for 1L students as well, if anyone is interested. And though that application process similarly is advertised on our website, has similar application dates. There are 27 clerks across the province in all of the different regions. So there's 9 regional centers. There's 10 clerks in Toronto, 3 in Central West, so Brampton, Milton area, 4 in Hamilton, 1 in London, 1 in Windsor. There's 4 in Newmarket, Oshawa, Barrie. There's 3 in Ottawa, 1 in Sudbury, and 1 in Thunder Bay. And as was mentioned before, 3 of the Toronto clerks are actually what we call divisional court clerks. So that's a part of the court that oversees appeals, some appeals, and judicial reviews of a statutory nature. When you're applying, we request that you make it very clear what position you're applying for. You can ask for more than one, but just rank them in the order in which your preferences are. And you only need to submit 1 application for the entire program. Applications will be going through the portal. So on our website, we'll have more information about the portal that you use to make your application. We require a cover letter, resume, a legal writing sample, 2 letters of reference, and transcripts. The legal writing sample should be 10 pages approximately. And I know that that means that many of your papers are probably longer than that. So when you are looking at what sample you want to provide to the court, you can distill a larger paper down. That's common practice. As Justice Pomerance stated, marks are, there isn't a minimum GPA that we require. We don't have a cutoff. We are actually really looking for the whole package, as it were. We like to see your experiences, your extracurriculars. We want well-rounded candidates who show a particular interest in the business of the court. And that's why things like the writing sample help to showcase kind of the different facets that you have as a potential clerk. And the interview process is kind of where we get to know you the best. So if selected for an interview, I really recommend that you speak to either a current clerk or a former clerk. I'm sure at the career office, they have a list of alumni that clerked with the court. Because it's an interesting opportunity. You get to speak. Our panels are usually members of the judiciary and then a manager. And it's an interesting opportunity to meet with the judiciary, because they'll be really interested to hear what you have to say, why you want to clerk with the court, how your legal reasoning works and that sort of thing. And I'm sure Andrea can give lots more information about that. So I just, if I were to recommend anything, it would be take time with your application, prepare, and speak to your alumni, former clerks, colleagues, career office when preparing your application. So I guess now may be the time, unless Justice Pomerance or Andrea, if you have anything to add, or would you like to go straight to questions?
I actually have a brief comment just to add, because just in case it comes up in questions. So in addition to like what I'll call like the hard tasks of a clerk, hard as in, like research, writing, the things that are on the job posting that you must do as a clerk, there's also a whole host of like professional responsibility and like ethical questions that you will face as a clerk. And these come up in the interview as well. And it's really an opportunity as an articling student as well. And, and even as law students, right? Like the Law Society of Ontario, the rules of professional practice apply to us throughout this journey, but it's been a real opportunity for learning and growth in terms of what does it mean to really be essentially a member of the court for this 1 year. Like, of course, I'm not a member of the judiciary, but as a law clerk, there are certain standards of professionalism and engaging with counsel and just anyone in the courthouse. And there have been several opportunities for me to really learn, like, how do I flex that muscle and grow into that type of professional that I want to be, and it's starting now. So that's a big part of the job that you cultivate along the way, but also should not be discounted, because again, these are skills that are learned and acquired and built upon. And it starts in law school, but I have really found that's been a large part of my articling experience so far.
Yeah, that's a excuse me, that's a very good point. The other thing I would say about the application process, when I'm looking at the materials pre-interview, I spend a lot of time on the writing sample. I think the writing sample is a very important part of your application. I think when you're choosing your writing sample, you should choose the writing that you are most proud of, whatever the subject matter. I mean, don't worry if it's a legal topic, if it was an immigration issue that we don't deal with in our court, but you think it's your best writing, submit that, because we're really interested in seeing how you communicate concepts, both verbally and in writing. And as was indicated by Megan, you can take a longer paper and make it shorter, or you can submit a portion of it. But if you, depending on where you are, if you're in 1L at this point, you might even want to think about the writing sample as you're preparing a paper that you might be submitting for a course. You might want to think about that as being a part of the use that you'll put that paper to. But I just thought I'd offer that I think the writing sample is very important, and don't think too much about the topic. It's going to be a legal topic, and just choose the one that you're most proud of. I don't know, Megan, if you agree with that. I'm hoping you do.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I definitely agree. I think it's the moment that you have an opportunity to shine. So please don't discount the writing sample.
Any questions? Please don't be shy. We're happy to try to answer them.
Chloe?
Yes, hi. I guess this is more of a technical question, but as pertaining to the writing sample, if we, like, I have some papers that I look back on and I'm like, I thought this was pretty good at the time, but I see some spots where I'm like, oh, I'd like to revise that. Is that allowed for the sample that we would submit?
I don't know the answer to that, Megan.
I don't see a problem. It's not like you're claiming it to be the paper. You can just include a footnote saying that you've edited it from a paper that you submitted at this date and this, that sort of thing. Certainly, I have been in that position when I was making my applications where you see something and read a clunky sentence that you wish you could change. So I don't think there's a problem with that. We know that a lot of the writing samples that come are generally pretty, heavily edited from their original form just because of the page constraints. So there shouldn't be an issue with that.
I was just going to add, as long as the edits are made by you and not by somebody else, I think that's the key from an ethical perspective.
Alicia?
Hi, how are you? So my question is also about the papers. As a dual JD student, if my paper, the one that I felt was the strongest, was something that I wrote for a US class, so it would follow a different type of formatting and citation, just a like all around like structurally different paper, is that something that would make a difference in the application process? Or should I try to focus on submitting a paper that went with a Canadian course?
I mean, it seems to me technically there's no reason you couldn't submit a paper written for an American class. Tactically, I mean, we're looking at stylistic issues like citations and things of that nature. And if you had something that, if you had a paper that you were also pleased with that was written for one of the Canadian classes, if you were choosing between the two, all things being equal, I'd opt for the Canadian one. But if you give us an American one, we'll know that you're following guidelines that relate to citation of American cases. And so I mean, we look at citations and we look at stylistic issues. We're also looking at your reasoning process. We're also looking at the logic that you use in conveying your ideas, your analytical skills. And so, sorry, I was thinking aloud as I answered that, which is not always a dignified thing to do. I think the answer is, if that's your best piece of work and you're most proud of it, I don't see a reason why you wouldn't include that.
Great, thank you.
Matthew?
I was wondering if you could just keep going on that train of thought you were having. You were saying you're looking for, logical reasoning, or persuasion. Is there anything else? I guess not like a strict grammatical or such requirement, but something that you're looking for that's underlying our writing sample.
I mean, I think the things we've identified, an understanding of the law, an ability to communicate well, an ability to make a logical argument that with various premises leading to a conclusion. What I will say is I find an advocacy piece more compelling than a descriptive piece. And what I mean by that is a piece that simply indicates this case says X and this case says Y and this is what the law is. That might be written very well. And if that's your best piece, send it in. But I think it's very compelling when you have a piece that argues a position, because that does allow us to really see your analytical abilities and your advocacy skills in writing. So if you have something like that, all the better.
Thank you.
If I can also, I can just share if people are interested what I did for my writing sample for this court. It was, again, an excerpt of a longer paper. And specifically, I think I provided a little cover note saying, this is like the general gist of what this paper is, but I provided the analysis portion of the paper, which was specifically arguing Canada's failed commitment under the Rome Statute to prosecute people allegedly who have participated in war crimes. So I specifically said, the judge, I'm assuming, who read my application would get into my argument right away. The factual content I sort of put in that short blurb, but I really wanted to see, I really wanted to present, these are the arguments and how I presented them, with citations, of course, included, to the court, if that's of assistance to anyone.
Any other questions? Don't hesitate to ask anything at all, and we'll do our best to answer it if we can. Yes, Kellyanne.
Hi, this is a question for Andrea in particular, but I wanted to know if you could share a bit about what the day-to-day is like as a clerk, and if you found from your experience just being introduced to various areas of public law, like if that's helped shape your decision of what you want to do after your clerkship.
Yeah, it's a great question. And, I'm probably going to provide a slightly different answer than I provided with Matthew earlier, because the day-to-day completely shifts depending on the day. But I would say I primarily work on, editing judgments. So, decisions, reasons for sentence, shorter motions, that endorsements that judges have to do. So a lot of editing and checking on the case law, ensuring that a case hasn't been overturned, or if it's been brought forward to appellate level courts. Sometimes I try to watch as much court as I can, not every day, but definitely several times a week is something that I've prioritized, both in terms of interesting subject matters, or as Justice Pomerance mentioned earlier, if there's a particular case that I've assisted a judge with in work, in beforehand preparation, I'd like to then watch the submissions made in court. So the day-to-day really varies. Sometimes there are education sessions as a clerk that I get to attend. If Justice Pomerance, for example, about a month ago was presenting at a conference on wrongful convictions, I was able to attend and listen to some of that. And that is, those educational opportunities sort of filter throughout the general work as a clerk. And then probably every day I have substantive conversations with judges on matters in their chambers. So I'm a personable, I like to speak, I like to socialize, but I also really apply that in my professional setting. So I make a conscious effort to see which judges are around, go say hi, see what they're hearing today, what's the week look like, I proactively offer assistance, is there anything I can read in advance? Do you want to debrief after? So the days really look different, but that's kind of a highlight of, it's a melange of tasks, really. I'm sure every judicial law clerk would answer the question slightly different, and that's just the nature of, I think every courthouse operates slightly different as well in terms of just norms and expectations of how the clerk assists the judges. But that's been my experience to date. And then sometimes I do have time where I'm sitting in my office with my door shut and I'm just trying to read or do some work sort of solo, but otherwise it's a very engaging job. In terms of how the experience so far has informed my thinking about future plans, I would say I'm very open in terms of what the future will bring me. I'm committed to the area of public law generally, but in terms of how the clerkship has either reinforced that or shifted things, that hasn't been my experience so far. I will say I am moving on to another clerkship after this year. So I will be clerking at the federal court next year. So I will have 2 trial level clerkships, which is its own sort of experience before I move on to practice. But I definitely see a career for myself in litigation. It's just sort of where I want to focus on. I'm not sure, but I do know that clerking at the Superior Court will for sure help me and prepare me for my clerkship next year with the federal court.
Can I throw in a few comments? And thanks, Andrea, for that description. I think that when it comes to the area of law that grabs you and that you want to practice in, when I was in law school, many more years ago than I'd like to admit, I had this sense that the decision I made about articling determined the rest of my life. And I now know that it doesn't. You make your best decision about where you want to practice, but people change their minds. People who practice criminal go into civil litigation. Civil litigators become criminal lawyers. People join the government. People do all sorts of different things. And so make your best decision based on your articling experience and your law school experience. But you are entitled to change your mind if it turns out that you either did not choose something that engages you or you are no longer engaged. The other thing I'd say about clerking is that as it relates to educational programs, and I can indicate that Andrea assisted me in preparing that speech, and you will be doing some of that as well as a clerk, and then you're able to observe the program, but there are also organized educational programs specifically for law clerks that are held throughout the year. And you also have the advantage of being able to attend the judicial education seminars. We have 2 a year, one in Toronto and one in Ottawa, and the clerks are able to attend those programs, which are always wonderful. So there are many educational opportunities that you have as a clerk. One of the skills that clerking requires is time management and the prioritization of tasks. Because, for example, in Windsor, we have 9 judges and Andrea works for all of us. And when we go into her office, there is a big whiteboard in the office that will list everything she's got on her plate. So that's actually really important for us. We can see how busy she is. But, I think, and Andrea's in perhaps a better position to speak to this, but one of the skills that you develop is prioritization of tasks and communicating with the judges. I mean, sometimes you'll get a deadline from a judge that's sort of arbitrary. Well, maybe I'll get it at the end of next week, but the judge doesn't really need it until 2 weeks from now. And so if something urgent comes up, perhaps you talk to the judge and ask about the deadline. And you have a mentor that can assist you with that. So I'm here to assist Andrea. We meet on a regular basis about what she has on her plate. Is it manageable? How should we be dealing with that? And so, that's one of the skills that you will develop as a law clerk. The only other thing I'd say is that we were speaking about clerks sitting in on court hearings and how valuable an experience that is. I just would say you don't have to wait till you're a clerk to do that. The courtroom is open to everyone. And the one advantage of Zoom hearings is that you can actually watch from wherever you are. And so if you have any interest in watching court hearings, you are more than welcome to either attend in person or to watch on Zoom. And if you wish to know what is happening at the courthouse, you can contact the judicial secretaries who will have a docket. Or if you're aware of a case being heard and you're interested in getting the Zoom link or coming to the courthouse, you're more than welcome to do that. It's always wonderful to look out in the courtroom and see students observing.
I think just one thing I'll add, I'm remiss not to mention it until now, but the opportunity for mentorship, I think is really, you can't really compare it to other articling experiences because I would argue because, having the ability to learn and work with members of the judiciary, like it's really, I really think about it. I'll never really have this circumstance ever again, unless at some point if I become a member of the judiciary and then therefore they're my colleagues. But I just have really been reflecting on, we have an articling principle, Justice Pomerance is mine, but I also have the opportunity to learn from others, from all of the judges here in Windsor. And there's something different about that relationship in comparison to other articling positions because I'm not trying to get hired back, and I think that that's sometimes a bit different. I'm not saying I approach these relationships in a different way, but I think the work dynamic is something that is unique. Like this is really a learning opportunity. Everyone here, I feel, is invested in my future, which is really great, but there's not that other looming sort of, I need to put my, like, of course I need to put my best foot forward, and I am, but it just feels different. So that's just something to think of if you're considering clerking for your articling, which at the Superior Court is the only option.
Well, and on that point, we really do want to know what you think. If we give you a judgment to edit and you see something that really gives you pause, or you think that there's a gap in the logic, or that there's a case that it doesn't, I mean, if you see something that you think is problematic, we don't want you to just tell us what we want to hear or make us happy. We want you to tell us what you think, because we'd rather hear it from you than make a mistake in our decision. And so, you know, we really do value the input that clerks have with respect to the issues. And, you know, we will often sit down and talk about the law and debate legal issues. And we want to know what you think.
I can just build on what Justice Pomerance and Andrea were saying about mentorship. Justice Pomerance mentioned a bit earlier about the fact that there's no hire backs, and for some that might be something that is a bit nerve-wracking when applying to a clerkship. But your mentor judge and the other judges that you work with are very invested in helping you launch your career and take those next steps. This is something I perceived as a manager of legal research and working with last year's clerks to find positions. You know, people went on to do some very cool and excellent things, and having the support of their mentor judge and the other judges that they worked for was very much an asset. And it's very, you know, reassuring to see how kind and how much time these judges will take to help you find the best place for you to land. And just also to follow up on one of the things that Kellyanne said, it's interesting to see the number of clerks who have come to the program with a sort of defined view of what law they would like to practice. And as the year goes on, they start seeing other areas of law that they are becoming quite curious about, you know. I've had several clerks in the past who thought they were going to be civil litigators who have then gone on to crim after a year with the court, or who started thinking about family law after not ever thinking, and you know, taking the courses in university, but after seeing it, you know, in person, it changes their view on things. So it's the nicest thing about the clerkship, as Andrea mentioned, is that you do get to see all of it, you know. Very few places will you see all of this kind of work, and in every region you will see almost all of it. So no matter where in the province you apply to clerk, it's still a very well-rounded experience.
And there's another good reason to be exposed to all areas of law. And I can speak from personal experience because I was a criminal lawyer and I was practicing exclusively in criminal law. And I think most judges today come with a specialized background and have a lot to learn because we're a generalist court and you're dealing with new areas and new issues. But when I began dealing with all of the areas, I came to realize how many good ideas there were in other areas of law that could be transplanted into the criminal context and vice versa. You know, in practice, we tend to think of them in silos. That, you know, issues that arise in the civil litigation context, ideas are there, but they don't necessarily translate to other areas. But in fact, there's a lot of potential for cross-pollination, and some of the really creative ideas can come from looking at another area of law to get a sense of a novel argument. So I'll leave that with you as well. Matthew.
Justice, I'm wondering what kind of advice would you give a new clerk, and why would you give that advice? You know, what sets a clerk up for success in your mind?
Well, I mean, I think, and this isn't so much advice, but enthusiasm excitement about the law, enthusiasm, a desire to learn. All of those things are part of the ingredients. I think the advice, and Andrea can correct me if I'm wrong, I think some of the advice I give clerks at the very outset concern time management, concern the fact that they will be getting assignments from a number of different individuals, and that they need to be able to prioritize, and that a big part of that is communication. If a judge asks you to work on something and they ask you to do something and you're not entirely sure what it is that they're asking, or you're not sure if they want you to zig or zag, or should you do both, ask the judge. We're very approachable, and it's better to ask and get clarification than go in the zig when you should zag, or vice versa. I think a line of communication between the judges and the clerks is very important. We expect clerks to work hard, but we don't expect clerks to be here all night finishing something up. It is it's hard work, and you'll want to work hard, but this is not a place where you're going to be in a room churning out memos at all hours of the day and night and never getting into a courtroom, etc. The other thing I will say to clerks, I believe I said this, Andrea, but if I didn't, I'll say it now to you. And that is that if there's an experience or an issue that you haven't been exposed to, that you'd like to be exposed to, if you really want to sit in on family motions and you haven't done that yet, well, just ask. Because we really do want to make the experience as fulfilling for you as we can. And so those are some of the pieces of advice that I would offer. Andrea, I don't know if you would add anything to that.
No, I would say that echoes it. And like just putting yourself out there, right? It could be maybe not necessarily here in Windsor, but it could be very easy, presumably, for a clerk just to be at their desk, wait till they receive an email with a task and sort of move forward. And that's one kind of experience, but there's a whole spectrum of experiences. So I think being proactive and really diving in and is what I'm trying to do. And I've been given that advice as well from Justice Pomerance and others, and the communication piece, and it's, diplomatic communications, professional communications, because again, it's one thing to say, time management and know how to prioritize, but how do you execute on that? And that is something that shifts over time, and you will learn different judges' styles in terms of their preferred method of communication, or having these types of conversations as well. So that's what I would add there.
And we're a pretty approachable bunch. We really are. When you are clerking, we have an open door policy. Sometimes the door really is open, but sometimes it's closed, but doesn't mean you can't knock and come in. So I think you will find that the judges are, certainly in Windsor, but I expect in every courthouse, judges are very approachable. Certainly when it comes to clerks, that you can talk to anyone about issues, and that we're here to support.
Thank you.
If I can just add something that Andrea said, that I see as a manager of the legal research, is that your clerkship is what you make of it. And Andrea is giving an example of someone who is clearly making the most of her time with the court and showing a high level of proactivity. And I think where people struggle is, what Justice Pomerance said about the balancing the work, to the detriment of not getting into court and not seeing the things that they want to see. So keeping that all in mind from day one is an excellent way to approach your clerkship, to make sure that you're keeping a fine balance of making sure all your work gets done, but also getting into court and seeing the advocacy and getting those learning opportunities.
Curtis, you have your hand up.
Hi there. This question is for Andrea. I was just wondering if there was anything that you did during law school that you felt or that you sort of planned on in terms of setting yourself apart in your applications? And maybe Justice Pomerance too, if you had anything to add on to that, of things that you find that are sort of unique or different that people have included in their applications experience-wise that might be a bit of a difference maker.
Well, think that's it's a difficult question. And I'm going to disappoint everybody, but by saying I was just myself truly, and that means being my professional self, but also just being candid when, and I think that means having like a high degree of emotional intelligence. Like I can remember my interview with Justice Pomerance and Justice Tranquilli from London quite clearly, and it was an interview, but there was also, it was an opportunity to start building rapport. And that's my approach in small discussions with people. In terms of my application, I did, volunteering in law school. I was at CLA during my entire 2L year as a clinic practice student. So I was doing CLA for credit. I took a wide range of courses, primarily focused on criminal law, but also public law. In 3L, I took a bit of everything, but that's past the point of application. Again, my writing sample was on a topic that was looking at Canadian criminal law, but also international criminal law. And that is an area of interest of mine. So it was an opportunity for me to also present to the court, here is something that I care about, and I can tell you why. But I really just didn't try to elevate my experience or my interest beyond what it was. I was interested in this opportunity. I had previous work experience before going to law school that I did include. So if anyone here has that, I would include that on your application. That's part of who you are. That's part of your story of returning to come back to school as a mature student. So that's it. Like I was really just trying to be true to myself, and in this circumstance, it worked.
Well, I can't improve upon that. I think that's the most important advice, is to be yourself. And why would you want to be anyone else? To be yourself, but also to showcase yourself. So, some people will have extraordinary experiences doing various things in various countries around the world, and tell us about that. But if that's not been your experience, then tell us what has been your experience. Tell us in your CV what you like. Tell us what you like to do in your spare time. Tell us some of the discussion in the interview will be about things of that nature. If there's something that makes your application stand out, well, that's great. But I think you want to just showcase who you are and what you've done, and your excitement about the law, your excitement about clerking, and particularly, and I know this is easier said than done, but the best interviews are those where you are comfortable and relaxed and yourself, and it's sometimes easier said than done. But I think that's really the goal, just to be yourself, showcase who you are and what you've got to offer, and relax and breathe.
Amazing. Thank you both so much. And thank you for being here today. It's been a really informative session.
Thank you. Alicia.
Hi, so this is a question more for Andrea, but when you started your clerkship, I was just wondering kind of how you felt, because perhaps it's just me, but the sound of starting a clerkship and suddenly having 9 judges as your superior sounds very daunting. And I was just wondering how you felt kind of going into it, and how helpful it was to have, one specific judge as your mentor that you can kind of turn to if it does get overwhelming or if you have questions.
Alicia, that's a great question. And I will share a few things that also speak to the clerkship program more broadly. So the clerkship starts in August, And that is an excellent time to start, because in my experience here in Windsor, but I gather from most of my colleagues across the province, the court is a little slower. And that's good in the sense that my first few weeks, not all of the judges were here, people are on vacation, different matters, they're writing. So it was an opportunity for me to sort of learn the ropes, so to speak, but when there were less demands of me. So I had a few editing tasks, I had some research, but it wasn't like, there were urgent deadlines. And I think that the way that the program is structured by starting then really sets us up for success in terms of easing into things. One of the hardest things I will say at the beginning was reminding myself, this is a formal work environment. I am speaking to my colleagues saying, Your Honor, Justice, these are minor points, but you have to sort of switch and learn that you are speaking to judges who are down to earth and personable and available, but there is an aspect of that I think takes a little bit of time to get used to. And my colleagues are great. So there are 27 law clerks across the province. We have a group chat on Teams, or we're one email away. I have some very good friends who are clerks. And while confidentiality is extremely important to every aspect of this job, amongst the clerks, we are able to sort of share and discuss our experiences, or sort of ask like, hey, have you come across this? What was it like in anticipation? And that's really helpful, especially being, I'm here alone in Windsor. There's also my colleague in London, and we try to sort of be each other's first point of contact. So I'm not truly alone, and all of those different resources have helped. And the job really ebbs and flows. So there are points where I have maybe a little bit more flex time, than there are others where I really have to protect and guard my time because I know I have some urgent tasks. So I would say there's like a slow ramp up. At least that was my experience. And that really does help to sort of overcome some of the initial apprehension, which is very normal and comes at I felt the same way starting my summer jobs in various places. And the adjustment period is definitely present and works to your favor.
Great, thank you.
The other thing is, I can't recall, Andrea, if we did this, but you also have one thing, Andrea did do this, while before the former clerk leaves, generally speaking, the incoming clerk will come and spend a day at the court and meet the judges and meet the former clerk. But I also like to have a Zoom meeting. It used to be an in-person meeting, now it's a Zoom meeting. And if the person's out of town, it would be a Zoom meeting in any event before the clerkship begins, so that any questions can be asked and there's at least an opportunity to connect beforehand, in the hopes that it might take down the nerves a little bit. Any other questions?
If there are no other questions, I'll reiterate that we will have time to follow up, and I'm sure that we here at Career Services have ample supports in place, great team member to support you through the application process and can connect you to any individual. We do have, of course, as previously mentioned, a list of alumni on hand and mentors to talk to about not just the process, but answer the questions about how to succeed in the field itself. So we look forward to you reaching out for that. And I can't thank you all enough for your time. This has been such an enlightening session to learn the details and the insights to it, but more so, at least for me, to hear about a few things: the importance of professionalism, which is something that I really am trying hard to impart on students. It's something that I think needs to be reinforced, especially coming back from the Zoom world and in-person interactions again, we're really seeing the importance and the highlighting of where that will take you in your career as well. So the little details do matter. Andrea, it sounds like this has been a phenomenal experience for you, and congratulations. It's wonderful. Your words of wisdom that will leave me today are that not only in this experience, but in anything, it is what you make of it. And it sounds like you're doing a phenomenal job at just optimizing this opportunity and for you, is it Megan or Megan? I'm sorry if it's
Megan, yeah.
Oh, it is Megan. Okay, I'm a Megan, so we get it back and forth all the time. Your role along with Jennifer, we thank you very much for supporting the students and bringing them on board. And of course, to Justice Pomerance, what a phenomenal supporter of Windsor Law you are, and for taking on the mentorship role with our students, but just the buzz you create around Windsor Law in general is wonderful. So thank you all for everything, your time especially. And again, as students, if you have any questions, reach out to the Career Services team. We are here for you in all endeavors, and we really look forward to connecting with you. So with that, thank you again to everybody, and we look forward to connecting again soon.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thanks, everyone.